Well, what an absolutely fantastic first Sunday. Look, the National Football League scriptwriters did an absolutely fantastic job writing in road wins for a wide variety of teams in the National Football League. I mean, for God's sakes, the Las Vegas Raiders spoiled Sean Payton's debut in Denver. Then, there was the game of the day, which was Tua and the Miami Dolphins in a thriller in Los Angeles, taking down the Los Angeles Chargers with an absolutely dime pass. I mean, a dime. I mean, a Bitcoin-style dime pass by Tua to Tyreek Hill at the end of the game to win it. And, of course, there's the Brock Purdy storyline where Brock Purdy just absolutely shuts up all of the haters around the National Football League. It is our big House of Takes NFL Week 1 2023 Sunday recap show. Thanks so much for tuning in. I am Dave DeBaugh. Look, if you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, please go ahead and subscribe. And of course, like this video if you're actually watching it on YouTube. And of course, the podcast is everywhere podcasts want to be. I am Dave DeBaugh, and I have to say that in terms of a first Sunday in the National Football League, as far as seasons go, it was sloppy, definitely in the first, the morning game, so to speak. I'm based on the West Coast. By the way, I am recording this at 6 p.m. PST. The Dallas Cowboys are already up like 16-0 on the Giants in a rainstorm. So we're not going to cover that game. We are going to cover, though, extensively the Miami Dolphins, Los Angeles Chargers game. Still saying San Diego, but we are going to cover that. That is our feature game of the day. But I did want to talk briefly about several other games and what went down in your National Football League on Sunday. Now, all of the rookie quarterbacks ended up losing today, which of course is not terribly surprising. The rookie quarterbacks, quite frankly, they tend to be generally on teams that aren't so good, and their performances generally mirror that of those teams. I mean, Troy Aikman won one game as a rookie in the National Football League, if you go all the way back to that. If you go back to Trevor Lawrence's first season in the NFL, it was, if you will, semi-disastrous until the second half of the season. So you don't want to overreact or underreact to how these players, these quarterbacks, these young quarterbacks actually play. You have to really sort of see the improvement week in and week out to really be able to determine whether or not these quarterbacks are actually going to be good, or are we going to end up calling them busts down the road. As for the Ravens, they ended up winning fairly easily against the Texans. My Minnesota Vikings got beat by a gritty, grindy Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in a game that, quite frankly, could have gone either way. On paper, if you looked at the statistics, you'd think that the Minnesota Vikings would have won. That is, of course, if you just ignored the turnover column for that particular game. Not surprising to see how well the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense actually played. Kirk Cousins was the second quarterback who received the most amount of hits in the National Football League last season. The guy that was number one was actually in the booth with CBS today and won Matt Ryan. I don't know how many more years of this Kirk Cousins can take with the Vikings. So nothing terribly surprising there in that particular game. Look, the Falcons took care of the Panthers really easily. The Commanders, I think the Arizona Cardinals played a little bit better. And I think a lot of us were probably giving the Washington Commanders a little bit too much leeway heading into this game, thinking they were a little bit better than they actually are at this point. The Indianapolis Colts, they did what they had to do. I mean, I thought, for the most part, the Indianapolis Colts played a pretty good game until we sort of got into crunch time. I will say that, as good of an athlete as Anthony Richardson is, he wins the award. And I wish I had the video or could show you the video, but it's a rights issue. But Anthony Richards absolutely had the worst throw I've seen in the National Football League, Thursday night included, so far this season. That being said, young quarterback, let's give him some time to develop. He did a lot of good things as well. I should point that out. Look, the 49ers went into Pittsburgh. If you tuned into the Gods of Odds show at all, we ended up picking the over under in this game. I went with the over. Brad Hoysev went with the under. Brad was right. I was wrong. I thought that this Steeler team would play a little bit better on offense. I think that just tells you, at least at the start of the season, it's a long season, as you all know. But in the National Football League, you have those teams that start really well, and then you have those teams that have good sort of middle seasons, and then you have those teams that peak. The San Francisco 49ers are one of those teams that, quite frankly, like the Dallas Cowboys, like the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFC, we expect them to be there at the end of the season. It was a little scary, quite frankly, how well the San Francisco 49ers actually looked in the first game of the season. I will go as far as to say the San Francisco 49ers were the most prepared team entering the season so far, minus the Dolphins and the Chargers, which was the game of the year. But the 49ers did not look rusty at all on either side of the ball. Thought their defense played really well. And I don't think the Pittsburgh Steelers were ever able to get anything going. Now, that doesn't mean I think the season's over for the Steelers. It just means the Steelers were playing one of the Super Bowl favorites the first game of the season. It's not always something that you want to have to do if you're a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers. You would have much rather played like the Tennessee Titans or the Carolina Panthers or even the Atlanta Falcons. Look, the Titans ended up losing to the New Orleans Saints. I don't know, quite frankly, what the Titans see in Ryan Tannehill as a starting quarterback in the National Football League. The Saints ended up winning. It was a close game, not too much to really talk about. Other than to say, I expected the New Orleans Saints defense to be pretty good this season. I have them in my top 5 in the NFC, and I think they performed really well today against a team that, quite frankly, couldn't figure out or didn't realize that DeAndre Hopkins was actually on their roster. Then you have the Raiders, the Las Vegas Raiders, going into Denver Bronco country as Sean Payton went ahead and relived some Super Bowl glory at the start of the game when he went ahead and kicked an onside kick, which if you only had to kick the ball 9.5 feet before you could touch it, then they would have succeeded in their onside kick. That wasn't the case in this particular game. You got to give it to Sean Payton for trying. Look, Russell Wilson just doesn't look right. Like the old Russell Wilson would have ran the ball into the end zone a couple times, would have moved a little faster. The pre-Denver Broncos Russell Wilson, the Seattle Seahawks Russell Wilson, minus the last year he was in Seattle, would have won this game. They'll figure it out. Sean Payton will figure it out. He'll figure out how to make this a 500 team, maybe a little bit better at the end of the day. But watching Jimmy Garoppolo who in the first series of this particular football game actually ended up being checked for concussion. I was like, here we go again with Jimmy G. He can't even play a single series without having to go into the little blue tent on the side of the field. So at the end of the day, the Raiders ended up winning 17-16 was your final there. Eagles held on to beat the Patriots. The Patriots are better than you think. It's just a question of, what will happen midway through the season if they end up losing some of their key players. Will they really be able to keep this thing near 500 this season with the roster that they've actually put together? One other thing, at the end of the game, Mac Jones, it was a 4th and 17. You got a 4th and 17 play. There's like less than 2 minutes to go in the game. And by the way, Dallas just kicked a field goal. They're up 19-0 now. Anyways, so he's got less than 2 minutes to go in the game. They're driving the ball down. They need a first down, and he needs 17 yards. And what does Mac Jones do? He throws a 10-yard pass to a tight end who was covered. I'm just, there's nothing more frustrating to me as a fan of football than watching a quarterback make a boneheaded decision like that. I'm not saying he played terrible throughout the game, but it's decision, like, look, Kirk Cousins did that in a playoff game last season. I just don't understand when check downs happen, when check downs shouldn't even be an option. It just doesn't make any sense to me at all when that sort of thing actually happens. All right. So moving on, the Rams probably surprised a lot of people, including me. Matthew Stafford actually played, pretty well, 30-13. I think Seattle just wasn't ready for the season to start. I think they probably needed to play a full preseason game with all of their starters. Like, not every team can get away with what the 49ers basically did during the preseason, where they played some of their starters in limited fashion. The first week in the National Football League is not always a clear barometer of how the season's going to go, because it takes teams a while to get their engines up and running. But when you've got a young team with a quarterback like Geno Smith, who could use as many reps as he could possibly get, I think they probably made a mistake in Seattle not playing the entire team for at least 3/4 of a single play or preseason game. And it showed today as the Rams actually went into Seattle and took them down. Packers took down the Bears 38-20. Justin Fields just did not look like the Justin Fields we think we were going to see entering this game. I thought Jordan Love played, well enough for that team to actually win the game. So I mean, it was actually, one of those games where, you sort of saw it and you sort of wondered, how is Jordan Love really going to play? And the stats on him: 15 for 27, 3 touchdowns, 0 picks. Now let's talk about Justin Fields. He had 59 yards rushing. You've got to bring that up when you're talking about Justin Fields. He went 24 for 37, 216, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. The surprising thing in this game was actually how well the Green Bay Packer defense actually played for most of the game. There were some points scored sort of towards the end of the game. Let's just call them garbage time. The Packers, Jordan Love, seemed to be in control. Aaron Jones ended up getting injured, but at times looked pretty good. I also felt like this was a game where you could clearly point to the coaching, and you could clearly say that LaFleur outcoached the Chicago Bears coaching staff in this particular game. And that, my friends, is why the Packers are 1-0 and the Bears didn't even come close to winning that game at Soldier Field. All right, so on to our feature game of the day. Actually, real quick before we get into that, I did just want to say this about Brock Purdy's stats for the day: 19 of 29, 220, 2 touchdowns, and more importantly, 0 picks. Christian McCaffrey, 152 yards on the ground with arguably one of the top 3 defenses in the National Football League. I rest my case. All right, so moving on to Tua and Justin Herbert. And I thought it was a good idea to talk stats a little bit because the Dolphins ended up winning 36-34 at the end of the game. Stats of this: 23 of 33 for Justin Herbert, 228. Just a fantastic running game by the Chargers. A really nice mix of pass and run throughout the game. Joshua Kelly looked great. 91 yards, 5.7 yards per carry. Austin Eckler had his longest run of his career, 117 total yards, 7.3 was his average. By far, I felt like Austin Eckler looked like the fastest running back in the National Football League heading into Sunday night's football game. Look, I don't know that a Dalvin Cook will look faster on Monday night. I don't think Saquon Barkley will look faster if the Giants can ever figure out how to get an actual first down. It's we're in the second, and it's still all Cowboys 19-0 in that one. In this particular game, this was a game, almost a question of who was going to have the ball last was going to win. But that was until Vic Fangio decided that there's something called a blitz, which he basically ignored for most of the game. Most of the game, the Miami Dolphins defense applied minimal pressure. They didn't bring anybody else. They had all those huge wide receivers they knew they had to cover. Vic Fangio really waited until the last series of the game before he actually was like, screw it. I'm just going to bring everybody. And he went ahead and he did that, which, my friends, is how a defense in a high scoring game can actually make a difference. I know what you're saying. You know, it's like a game of no defense. I mean, when we talk about stats in this game for the Dolphins, you're talking about 466 yards for Tua. Like the record for the Dolphins is held by Dan Marino, and it's over 500 yards. Tua, not that far off of the record. He's like one Tyreek Hill screen pass away from getting Dan Marino's record of the Miami Dolphins. 28 for 45. Clearly, these offenses had 2 different strategies. The strategy for the Chargers was to certainly be more balanced. The strategy for the Dolphins was, of course, to distribute the ball to a wide range of wide receivers. In fact, there were 8 wide receivers that caught passes, or eight different people caught passes throughout the game. Tyreek Hill had 11 for 215 yards. The Cheetah was absolutely phenomenal, including catching the game-winning catch, which I called a Bitcoin dime. I mean, it was an amazing pass by Tua to begin with. And it was an even better catch by Tyreek Hill. You have to look for it in the highlights. It was an amazing catch. 2 touchdowns for the Cheetah. Waddle chipped in 4 catches for 78 yards. And this is important. Both Waddle and Tyreek Hill both had averages of 19.5 yards per reception, which basically means their second best wide receiver was running very similar patterns to Tyreek Hill, which means they were stretching the defense pretty thin. Outside of that, they had a bunch of other wide receivers that had 3 catches and 2 catches as well. It was a fantastic game plan by Mike McDonald. I thought it was a fantastic job by Vic Fangio, at least at the end of the game when they had a chance to win it on defense. They absolutely went ahead and did it. Too often in the National Football League, things look way too easy for quarterbacks who are in their 2-minute drills. Vic Fangio put down on paper how to deal with that situation in the modern day National Football League against one of the top tier quarterbacks. Look, Justin Herbert did not know what hit him on the last drive of that game. By far the best game of week 1 on Sunday, unless we have some sort of miraculous New York Giants comeback here on Sunday night, which quite frankly isn't going to happen in a rainstorm. All right, that is it for our House of Takes National Football League recap for week number 1. When you think about the young quarterbacks that didn't get their wins today, they'll get them. I think maybe the most surprising thing that I saw in the NFL for week number 1, though, was just how well teams played on the road. Now, we always talk about teams having to fly 2,500 miles from San Francisco. I'm here in the Bay Area. From here to Pittsburgh, it's like 2,500 miles. For the Dolphins to fly to Los Angeles, it's like 3,000 miles, basically. And we always talk about how traveling across the country is a hard thing. And I think at times during the National Football League season, that can be true. But it's the beginning of the season, and I think everybody was absolutely fresh. In the afternoon games, and there were 5 of them, all games were won by the road teams. I do want to point out one other quick thing, which is Jimmy Garoppolo actually did finish the game without being injured or walking away with any nicks, which are going to prevent him from playing next week. I know you were probably wondering about that. All right, that is it for the House of Takes NFL Week 1 recap for 2023. If you, once again, haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, please go and subscribe and, of course, like this video. For the House of Takes, I'm Dave DeBob, wishing you all a tremendous rest of your sports viewing day.